Kailash,
Yeah,
perfectly fine.
Cool.
Welcome to Avantika University virtually.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rishabh Kiran, and I'll be moderating today's session. I request the audience to switch off their cameras and put their microphones on mute. And with that, let's begin the session. Hi, sir. It's a pleasure having you at this portfolio building session at Avantika University. And so before we can start off with the session, I would like to give a small introduction about you.
Sure.
Mr. Kailash Nad is the CTO at Zerodha, now the largest stockbroker in India, where he works on interesting financial technology projects and where he still programs every day. For a brief while, he was in academia conducting research in artificial intelligence and computational linguistics, where he obtained a BSc in computer science in 2008 and a PhD in artificial intelligence and computational linguistics in 2011 from the Middlesex University, London. He is a hobbyist developer and a tinkerer and takes great interest and devotes a lot of time experimenting and developing little things for fun. So let us welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Kailash Nad. Over to you, sir. We'd like you to proceed with the session.
Thanks, Rishabh. That was a nice little intro. I'd forgotten about those things. Thanks for reminding.
Sure.
So I found this. So when Rohit reached out, right, I found it quite interesting because the idea of portfolios, right, they are of great interest to me personally. And at Zerodha, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Zerodha. We are a stockbroker. We build financial technology. We build apps and trading platforms that people use to trade and invest. At Zerodha, the way we've built the company, it's rather unconventional. So, like you said, we are the largest stockbroker today, and the company has grown quite big over the last 10 years, 1,200 employees. But the tech team, the product team, is just 30 people. Now, that is very unconventional, and I think it's important to stress that because the entire team, the entire suite of products, all technology and engineering we've built, it's all started from a hobbyist hackers portfolio. So when we've hired and grown the team from 0 to 30 people over the last 7 years, company's 10 years old, we are 7 years old, the tech team. It's all been entirely based on an applicant's portfolio. So personally, many of the developers that we have in the team, I don't even know of their academic or educational qualifications because they don't really, the degree that you hold does not reflect of a person's engineering skills, right? Good engineers and developers, designers, product folks, they're all self-made. So I'd like to start by saying that I'd like to start by stressing the importance of understanding that fundamental idea. So Avantika University seems to be doing it seems to have taken a very interesting approach, which I quite appreciate, which is very unusual, among the conventional engineering colleges and institutions in India. So I think this is from my personal experience, and like I said, we have very unconventional views on this. So you may take all of this with like a big pinch of salt. So a good engineering degree or a program is basically fundamentally just a guiding path for a person to discover their own personal interests and focus. Going through a program like you guys are doing at Avantika, you discover concepts that you weren't really aware of, would not have been aware of otherwise. You chance upon a certain thing that piques your interest, and it could probably change your life because you could end up devoting the rest of your life chasing that interest. You never know. These things, they're sparks. You get great faculty who can guide you and mentor you. You meet like-minded folks, friends who share the same interest as you. So if you look at pretty much any given number of startups or innovative companies that have sprung over the last 10 or 15 or even beyond that years, you'd see that most co-founders are schoolmates or college mates. So that's the network effect of being in an environment where you have a bunch of people who share your interests. Now, I can't really comment on, you know, the exams, the curriculum. Of course, you may or may not require all of that, but beyond that, conceptually and fundamentally, it's all about discovering your interests and chasing them. And when you chase those interests, you become, and when you experiment and tinker constantly, that's when you become or evolve into, you know, a good engineer or a product person or a designer. And the portfolio that you construct is a reflection of that. It is not about how beautifully presented it is. You know, so Rohit shared 3 portfolios with me. I've looked at them, quite interesting, and I've made a few comments. They're all on Behance. So it's not about being on Behance. Of course, Behance is a nice network. You know, you should share your stuff there. And it's not about using the best possible color palette to present your work. It's none of those things. It's about the sustained interest you have, like the genuine interest you have, and how your interest and the experiments that have been fueled by your interest come through and reflect on your portfolio. So when we hire at Zerodha, we, you know, let's say a CV comes through, we don't really scan through the CV looking for academic specifics. I straight away jump to the portfolio section. You know, people, that's the most interesting bit. You know, stuff, hobby projects, right? That's absolutely the most valuable aspect of a portfolio. So I straight away jump to, you know, the hobby projects or portfolio section. I look at people's GitHub. I look at the projects that they've done. It's interesting because these hobby projects truly reflect the spirit, the engineering spirit someone possesses, because these are the projects that people do when, you know, nobody is judging or looking. I will go start a new project today just because I felt like doing it and I'm excited about it. So I go share it on GitHub. Now that truly reflects the kind of engineer a person is. So personally, like I said, when we try to evaluate people and their engineering skills, I straight away jump to their hobby projects. And personally, I weigh that way more over industry experience, because industry experience is great, of course. I mean, but again, these are all mostly under constrained environments created by other people. Hobby projects are always unconstrained. You know, you have full freedom, you do what you like, and that truly shows what you are as an engineer. And just a second, I'd made a couple points on the portfolio here. Yeah, so that's about it. I didn't, you know, this is not a lecture. I just wanted to share my view and interact with you guys. And speaking of portfolios and the uniqueness of portfolios, right? So the one thing I noticed was the 3 portfolios that were shared with me, all of them have very interesting and curious IoT projects, you know, smart fridge, there's a garbage detector, there's a smart walking stick, very interesting, you know, nice projects. But are all the 3 students, are they all keen IoT experts, or is it what they really like? What exactly is their specific area of interest? That didn't come through. But just to cite, just to give you a concrete example of the importance of, you know, the spirit and uniqueness of portfolios. So what you should really focus on when building a portfolio is not about building a portfolio for the sake of building it. Just collating your true interest, no matter how trivial or wild they are. It could be hardware, it could be anything, could be research, could be, you know, technical writing, could be engineering, could be software. All that matters is that your portfolio collates your true interest in work, and whoever is looking at your portfolio, it immediately comes across to them saying, oh, this person has a keen interest in IoT and he's done 2 or 3, you know, doesn't matter how little projects. So that's about it. These are the views that I wanted to share. And yeah.
Great, sir. So then we would like you to go ahead and share your views on the portfolios that have been shared with you, unless you have anything else to say to our students.
I think we can go over the portfolios, and I think we'll get a bunch of the. I think it'll evolve from there. There are certain points that I want to highlight, and I think it'll be portfolio review plus more views. It'll go like that.
Okay.
Would you want us to flash, Kailash, those portfolio links here on the screen so that
Yeah,
the
it would be
students
nice. Yeah,
also understand?
that's right.
Great.
That's right. Everybody will have context.
Rishabh, I'll just share the portfolio links. Can you please share your screen? By that time, if any of the students who are attending, by the time we flash the portfolio links, if you have any early questions, feel free to ask them. Make sure that you speak out your name and then ask the question.
Yeah, as I said, this is not a lecture. You can ask absolutely anything. One thing again, I've observed and I felt when I was a student was that there are a lot of these questions, certain quirky ones, certain questions that seem silly that we have as students that we don't really get to ask, or we're too afraid or shy to ask. If you have any such questions, please feel free to ask absolutely anything, no matter how trivial. I mean, what font should I use on my portfolio? Does typography play an important role? I mean, absolutely anything you want to ask, and I'll try my best to give you an industry developer perspective on that.
Hi, Siddhant Joshi here.
Hi, Siddhant.
Yeah, so I don't have a portfolio question right now, but can I ask a question related to your company, something like that?
Absolutely, anything, yeah.
Yeah. So I have my brother who's a stockbroker, and we have a lot of discussions regarding your company and the progress. So I'm not a experienced person in this, but I have heard a lot about your company. So I got to know that you developed a platform by name Kite, and it is quite user friendly, and it's a revolutionary thing in this domain. But I'm quite confused about why the name Kite. Maybe this is quite silly, but I am confused about why the name is Kite.
It's not a silly question at all, because the name that you decide to give a product or project of yours,
Yeah,
it goes a long way. It pretty much determines the future of the project in a lot of aspects, right?
yeah, actually, yeah.
And it's very important. By the way, that's an amazing question. When you build a hobby project, when you come up with a piece of engineering, I think you should spend some time on coming up with a nice name that you truly are passionate about. Why it was named Kite, until that point, until Kite was out in the industry, it was standard for people to be offered really old and clunky trading platforms by stockbrokers. You download a Windows program in EXE, you'd have to copy DLL files here and there. You'd run it, it would require n GB of RAM. It'd be a full screen it'd be a full screen application with lots of tables and numbers and widgets and all flashing, and you'd require continuous and constant help, expert help from the broker to even operate it. So it was clunky and 15 years old, even until 2015. There were no good trading platforms. So when we started building our trading platform, we wanted it to be super lightweight and super easy to understand and super easy to operate, and basically generally, pleasant. And I thought Kite is a great example. Everybody can operate a kite. Everybody's familiar. It's super lightweight, super simple, but it soars really high. For just a piece of paper with some thread and a couple of little bamboo sticks, it can fly really high, right? Kite is an amazing piece of technology, as a toy. So
Yeah.
that was the motivation. So once I had that name, that had a great impact and effect on how the actual software turned out to be. It was all anchored on that name, on that, on the feeling that a kite would evoke in you. and how it's lightweight. So the Kite, the name and its brand identity kind of determine the trajectory of the entire trading platform. That's why I was saying that, coming up with a nice name is really important.
Yeah. Now I see the connection. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir.
Hey, morning.
Thank you.
Hatim,
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, sorry, Hatim, to interrupt. Kailash, just one feedback that while we are going to be flashing the portfolio of these 3 students, from what you had seen to what we would be flashing in the screen right now, you'll see quite some difference because the students have also gone out and updated it. It is also because they wanted to ensure that whenever you see their portfolios, they wanted to present good things to you in their portfolio, in their journey. So there might be certain difference there, but we will stick to you sharing your feedback. At the same time, others can learn from things that they've done.
Sure, that's fine.
So I just thought I'll give you a heads up on it. Sorry for the interruption. Hatim, over to you. And post Hatim's question, we will shift to the portfolio.
Hello, sir. So I'm a Hatim Nomani, engineering student here at Avantika University.
Yeah.
So my question was, in our portfolio, should we have to have a project with using the same technology as the company is using, which we are applying to? So, for example, in Android development, so some companies may use native Java platform or Kotlin or maybe Flutter. So should we have those project including using those technology itself, or is it all right if we have a simple Android app but not that particular using that particular technology?
It goes both ways. It's not always important, but if you're applying for a specific role, it may be very useful. So a lot of roles today, mobile development, etc., have specific requirements. The role may be mobile developer, but it specifically say, we're working on Flutter. In which case, if you have a Flutter project to show, that's great. And that's only really for specific roles. But broadly, honestly, it doesn't truly matter because, as I said, what matters is the quality of your engineering. If you have done a bunch of Android projects and you've gotten really good at Android, and that comes to the portfolio that you are adept at building Android applications using native Java, then as a good engineer developer, it wouldn't take you a lot of time to just learn Flutter because you've already learned the fundamentals of mobile development. So it is not always important. It's good to have an applying for specific roles, but what really matters is that you show a true and deep understanding of whatever target platform, because technologies come and go, right? Flutter is 3-4 years old. It was alpha until a year ago. So you can't always expect people to have the latest frameworks or technologies, on their portfolios, and it's okay. You just have to have projects that show knowledge and interest in the broad area and not, very specific technologies, because you can always pick them up.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah.
So yes, sir. I'll be sharing my screen right now with the portfolio screens that have been shared with you.
Yep.
So as and when you want to navigate to a certain project, you could just tell me to do so.
Sure. We can look at Shivam's portfolio, right? Yeah, that's right. I have it open here also.
Is the screen visible to you, sir?
Yep, it's visible to me.
Okay.
Shivam, are you on the call?
Yes, sir. Hello, Kailash.
Hey, Shivam. Just a second. Yeah, so these are my broad observations. I was looking at the clock, right? The plant clock. If you scroll down a bit, that's quite looks nice. Did you model the ceramic pot yourself? Is it a 3D model? How do you do that?
So I we used Blender for it. It was a redesign project, part designeering of course.
Hmm.
So we used redesigned a table clock. So I used Blender 3D model for rendering this.
Nice. The models come out really well. It looks really cool. So it's a nice, product concept. But what caught my eye was the uh, first line. Plants, plants/grasses are believed to reduce stress. Now, it's very easy to gloss over that, but imagine this product is being evaluated critically, right? Would you go ahead and build or design and put effort into a product based on just a belief or an assumption? And who believes that, by the way? Do you believe it, or
So it was some kind of online research which I did while this whole process. So this whole part which I did was a part of the course, and this was the format which I had to follow. So I followed the same.
no, no? So it's not about the format. See, product format, it's all nice and cool. But I was just saying that first line, right? It has a lot of impact because, uh, I mean, this is a student project, so it's absolutely fine. But imagine you were in the industry, and this was being evaluated critically, and it had, real ramifications. The first question would be, would you design a product based on just a belief? So the point is, you have to have a strong rationale justifying the project. So if it's a personal belief, you have to have done enough research and experiments, and you have to cite those experiments saying, I did so and so experiments, and then therefore it's my hypothesis. Now, if you're saying it is believed to be, that implies that it's a general belief. So you should cite the research that that supports your product, because that's basically the one statement that defines the whole product, right? It's a grass clock, and this is why you're doing it. So it's very important. Now, it's not really got to do with how you presented the portfolio, but the problem statement is very important. Doesn't have to be an essay, just a single line, but it has to have a strong rationale and, objective facts backing it. And just to add, it's not just a belief. There's enough scientific evidence and research, supporting this argument. So that caught my eye, and that was just the first line I read. And you could imagine that in, other scenarios, people would look at this text critically. So you don't, when again describing a project, you don't have to write a lot, but what you write should be concise, and it should be backed by facts. But the design's quite cool. So that was one point I made a note of. And there's an IoT project, and there's a little software project called Zany Face, right? Quite, very interesting. It's nice. So you also have GitHub links there. So I looked at both the repositories, and Zany Face I wanted to try and run locally, but I got stuck in two places. None of these projects on GitHub, they have any instructions on how to run the project. Of course, the IoT project is not, you can't just download it and run, it has hardware dependencies and requirements, but the Zany Face project, anyone should be able to just, download the code and run. So this is again a general pointer, and I think it applies to all the portfolios here. When you share stuff, reproducible stuff, especially software on GitHub, it is extremely important to have a section on your README that has concise instructions on how to run the project. Otherwise, your user, reader, reviewer, evaluator, they'll have a tough time figuring out, do I need a C compiler? Do I need GCC? Which version of GCC do I have to have other dependencies? What command do I run to execute your project? Now, being stuck, the only way for me or someone to evaluate would just be to read whatever you've written. But ideally, if you're presenting software, I'd like to, use the software myself. So it's very important to have a really small installation or usage instruction section where you just have 3 or 4 lines explaining the steps exactly and how to reproduce and run your code. And this point applies to all the portfolios that I saw here. And it's not a matter of portfolio. This is something you should follow as an engineer, developer forever. Anything that you publish online for others to use, you should have usage instructions, and people shouldn't be scrambling to figure out how to use your project. That was another point. And can we open your website?
Sure.
Hello.
Yep.
Any issues? So, are you done with this review, or
Oh no, I was
is
saying
there something else?
could we open his website, shivamsr.com?
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. Where is this hosted, Shivam?
I've used a shared hosting.
Okay.
While all of these links open, a suggestion, Shivam, if you have any questions or others, you could keep asking.
Yeah, please.
So I totally agree with your backing up with data and adding instructions to all this readmes of my projects, and I'll surely implement and reflect back to my portfolio soon.
Sure,
Thank you for
sure.
suggestions.
Sure, no problem. It's okay if the website doesn't load. The point I wanted to make was, so you have a bunch of blog posts that you made in June 2019. And I think there are like 5-6 posts there, and nothing before or nothing after. So it just felt like the posts were created because you wanted to set up a portfolio website, and there has been no maintenance after. Now, that's again, I mean, going back to my original point, right? Your portfolio should be simple and concise, and it should be a reflection of your interests. You don't need to create a portfolio for the sake of creating a portfolio. It's completely okay if you don't have a blog, but if you don't really like blogging. So you'd rather not have a blog than just have a blog which appears to have been created, just for the sake of building a portfolio. If you have a blog, if you keep it active, one post every 2 or 3 months, even with stuff that interests you, that adds great weight and value to your portfolio. So seeing stagnant chronology on a blog, you'd rather not have that. That was another point. And one last point about your website. It looks nice graphically, nice graphics and all, but you'd rather, again, try and create a website on your own with minimal graphics. All of that is fine, rather than use a template. Because the way you present your website, when you use a template that many other people use, it's very difficult to, again, it's not personal, right? Many people will have similar looking websites. So either you customize it to, again, reflect your passion, interests, and work, or you create one from scratch. So that again has great value. When you see a website that somebody has created from scratch, no matter how simple, and versus a template website, that's again, you definitely get more weightage on stuff that you created on your own. Or if you use a template, you customize it enough to make it your own. So that was my last point of feedback for you.
Thank you, Kailash.
Sure. And there's one other thing. It's a general pointer, and again, it applies to all three portfolios. So the resumes, right? Your resumes have sections where you've listed things that you've worked with, things that technologies, you've CSS, JS, XML, Android, Java. I think there are like 10, 15 things. But I think beyond 3 or 4 things, that just becomes noise. Now, you should be, again, showing your focus and interest. If you have, let's say, 15 technologies listed out, when I look at it, I don't know what interests you. I don't know which technology you are more adept at. I don't know which technology you have more experience in. That just doesn't come through. So you'd rather, there's no value in, listing down 15, things. You'd rather pick 2 or 3 things that you really like. So instead of saying CSS, HTML, Java, PHP, Python, you can just say, web development. And I've done 3 projects in web development. That immediately implies that you know how to make backends work, you know how to make JavaScript and HTML, CSS frontends work. So I think that has more value than listing down numerous technologies, which is very hard to judge. And that's something I noted down about all the 3 portfolios. Just another point. Yeah, so I think we can look at the next portfolio. Do you have anything to ask, Shivam?
No, thank you for your valuable feedback, Kailash. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
So, sir, which portfolio do you want to be open now?
Next one, I've heard. Okay, it's Summits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the screen visible to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Samit has a photography section. Samit, are you here? Can you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are those? Did you click those photos?
Yes, sir.
They are stunning, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know it's not engineering, but great photos. So
Thank you, sir.
I made a note there. Yeah, and much of the feedback that I had for Shivam applies to you also.
Okay.
You also have IoT projects.
Yes, sir.
All of you have IoT projects. So are you all IoT experts, or are they just hobby? Those things don't come across on your portfolio. So
Okay.
the one thing that stood out to me was photography. I could see that was you and your personal interest. And you see how that immediately stood out, right? So making your portfolio your own with your own personal interest and passion is very important. It immediately stands out. And I don't really have any specific comments on these platforms. All of the projects you guys have done, they look nice. They are nice projects. But the same thing on your GitHub. Wait, I don't really have your GitHub noted here. Yeah, it was about again, instructions on how to reproduce your projects, and I like how your website has the projects organized there. So you land on your website and immediately shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. It doesn't tell you if those projects are actively maintained, but you land there and you immediately see your work. So that's good. And there was this one line that said, exceptional problem solving skills. I don't know if it was on your resume or on your website's homepage. Where was it?
So it was on my website.
Yeah. So again, this feedback, point of feedback, is not really specific to you, but in general, right? When someone says, I'm a great team player, or I have great problem solving skills, I'm a great communicator, I think those are things that can't be evaluated. How could I possibly know that you are a great problem solver, right? By reading that line, I would know that you are a great problem solver by looking at your projects and portfolio. And it should occur to me naturally, and evaluated that you are great at problem solving by looking at your work. So personally, when you have these lines on the CV where you say, where you describe yourself, I don't think they help in evaluating a person's engineering or design skills. I don't think they add any value. So whenever I look at CVs, like I said, I skip through all of those things and only look at projects and portfolio and work, because those things immediately convey the way you structure your README, the way you describe your project in the README, the way you have usage instructions on your README, that will immediately tell me that you are a great communicator and you know how to communicate technical details to a potential user or an audience. So again, this is entirely personal. I wouldn't have, descriptions like that anywhere. They don't really help evaluate a person. Only really the work and their in-person attitude really help evaluate. So that was the point. Yeah, just a simple thing, but just a point I noted down. And that's it. Like I said, there's a lot of overlap in the feedback I have on all three portfolios. So lots of things that I said to Shivam also apply to your portfolio here. So that's all I have here. If you have anything to ask Jose, please do.
So basically, I have one question. So in case I am targeting companies with two different domains, so how should I segregate my projects in my portfolio?
Not really. I mean, segregation only applies when you have a large number of projects. If you have dozens of projects, one in IoT and one in software, then yeah, it'd be nice to have two sections where you have coherence, lots of IoT projects, lots of software projects. If it's just a handful of projects, and if you have eclectic interest, you like software and IoT, and you've done a few projects here and there, it's okay for them to be in one place, as long as they are presented easily.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. If you have.
So should we move on to the next project, sir?
Yeah.
Our portfolio.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. I believe it is Manas's portfolio.
Manas looks like a boss man in that photo.
Hello, sir. Thank you.
Hey, Manas. You don't like Behance, is it, Manas?
I prefer my website. I think, yeah. So I'm working on my website. Actually, the link provided here, I think this is my old website, and I'll be developing my new website on React. Though it's not complete, so I've not updated it. But yeah, I don't prefer Behance as of.
Well, I could figure that because there was very little here. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't really use Behance myself, but then so I looked at your website, manaschauble.me, and hoping to see a a better list of projects descriptions there, but I don't think your current website has anything. It's just it just has your name and a couple lines of introduction. So I was a bit lost there. Ideally, you should have, you should have added content there or here. Not having Behance is absolutely fine, but you could have just listed down your projects there. And one particular project caught my eye. You have a PHP project that you've written, right?
The SQL injection prevention.
That is right.
Yeah.
So I could we open GitHub? Could you open that project on GitHub?
Sure. I guess there's a link. Rishabh, can you scroll down? On the project, after opening the project, just scroll.
Hello?
Or else you can, you can click on the GitHub icon here.
This one?
No. Below
And the one on the
save-
left, the sidebar on the left, right? Bottom, there's a GitHub icon.
Yep. Which project is it?
SQL injection.
the second.
Can you open loginsuccess.php?
Login success. Just a minute. Is this the one?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
And can you go to line 27? Yeah. So, Manas, I found this quite amusing and funny. I mean, it was nice. It's interesting because the project demonstrates, unless my understanding is wrong, please correct me. The project demonstrates SQL injection and ways to prevent it, right?
Yeah.
But that line has, I mean, it's wide open to SQL injection.
So that is the this is the file where the SQL injection can happen. There's another file which is, I guess, say login success safe. I guess login_success_safe. So Rishabh, can you open that file?
See, this is what I was getting at. Now, I found it amusing because there's SQL injection, and I couldn't figure out if that was a hole there or if it was intentional, because the README didn't convey that to me. So imagine somebody is looking at your project, right? And so I had to click through all the PHP files, login success, sign up success, to figure out kind of what was happening. And that's a lot of work for a potential user or an evaluator, right? How could I possibly know that what exactly you're trying to convey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even I agree that I think I should include a README file here, which
absolutely. So first, when I saw that line, I thought this project that shows how to prevent SQL injection has SQL injection. Then I had to click through the other files to figure out that, oh, this is what it's attempting to do. But that takes time, and potential users, evaluators, they won't have the patience. So again, stressing on the importance of README and usage instructions and concise instructions. Yeah, we can look at that file anyway. Is that the one? Login success safe.
Yeah.
Do you program in PHP a lot?
I think I used to do. I used to work on PHP a lot, but I think I'll need to shift to Node, I think. But yeah, as of now, I'm working on PHP only. Yeah.
Okay, because again, line 19, right? That could be an error there. If the front end doesn't send u_name, that will fail because there's no isSet check like you've done on line 17.
Yeah.
So these are the things you should pay attention here, because this project is attempting to show a safe way, right? It's not like a side channel bug in a larger project. You're very specifically trying to demonstrate a safe way of doing this. And that demonstration ideally should not have so many holes. So you should pay attention here. Just a second, there was something else. Just a second, I'm just opening this here. Yeah, could you please scroll down a little bit, line 105? See, I know that this is a portfolio evaluation thing, but
Sure, sir.
I couldn't help but, as a, yeah. So that massive if-else table, right? You should just use a regular expression or a map. You ideally wouldn't have, 50 conditions of if, 50 if conditions in a production app. So just something else that I spotted. And again, could we look at line 174? So how these, wherever you've executed these SQL queries, right? If there's a database connection failure, packet drop and whatnot, they'll panic. So you have to address those. I don't remember PHP exactly, but try catch, try except, or whatever. So just another thing that I spotted.
Yes, I guess that thing is missing over there, the trackage.
Yeah. So these are all sanity checks are a very important part of writing safe code. So you just have to be careful about these things, especially when demonstrating on how to write safer code. So just something else that I'd spotted, and that was it. Again, your CV listed down a bunch of technologies. Like I don't know, 10 or 15 things. You should be concise and communicate what really interests you. If you say 15 things, I'd have no idea of how good you are at those 15 technologies. And yeah, just be, just keep those sections short and simple. There's no need to, pad a resume. Even if it's just 5 lines, it's absolutely fine as long as it truly reflects who you are and your interests. And again, that's been my feedback for all 3 portfolios. So that's it. I don't have any further feedback on your portfolio, man. It's just these things that I spotted.
Sure, I think, yeah, I've noted down the points, and I'll surely work on them and reflect, and I'll make sure that these things reflect on my portfolio as well as on my GitHub.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kailash, before we proceed, I wish to give you a compliment here. And the compliment is the meticulous way in which you've gone out, actually looked at each of the portfolio line by line and the feedback that you're giving. I'm sure that this is going to help our students to actually look at this in a very different perspective. So I think all of us are amazed at the way you're giving feedback, and I'm sure that all of them want to thank you, for this. But this is really insightful.
Well, thank you. That is the, as I said, right? Portfolios are of great interest to me, and when you go out in the industry, there will be people who take a keen interest, on your portfolio. It could be just one line. Could be, you never know what people notice, which is why it's very important to keep portfolios concise and simple and, you know, true to oneself. But yeah, thanks for that.
Kailash, you know, I have one more request, which after you've shared the pointers, I believe that you, Rishabh, is there one more portfolio to be done? We've done all three, Rishabh?
Yeah, we've covered all three.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We've
So,
covered all three.
yeah. So Kailash, one of the other thing is that on this call, we have a lot of students who also aspire to take up user experience as, you know, their career options as well.
Yeah.
And if you could also throw certain light on it in terms of, because a user experience team, a user interface team works very closely with the technology team. And I think some of your inputs there would also help them in terms of how they should structure their portfolios, and what is it that, you know, as an evaluator, you would like to see in them.
Right. Yeah, sure. I think an important thing to realize here is that when one's a student, when you're a student, it's easy for me to say that, you know, one should do a lot of hobby projects, but not everybody may be able to, you know, practically work on lots of projects. Could be time constraints, could be other constraints, could be anything. So especially when it comes to UI and UX, a very easy way of showcasing that you have a keen eye for UX without actually working on, let's say, a real world project, is to spot something out there that doesn't quite seem right to you. We can take IRCTC as a notorious example, right? Booking a ticket is not easy. The number of steps involved in booking a ticket, you know, it's something that people diss about all the time, booking train tickets. Now, if your interest is in UI and UX, you could pick a problem that people know about, you know, IRCTC for one, or could be anything. And you could reimagine it and re-envision it and come up with an alternate hypothesis. And it could just be a few wireframes and mockups. And you could add that to your portfolio saying, IRCT has this issue which I don't really like. It takes 10 minutes and 15 clicks through cryptic menus to get to booking a seat. Ideally, it could have been done like this. Now that way, when I look at you, I know that you're a student. When I look at your portfolio, I know that you're a student. So I wouldn't expect you to have worked on real world projects yet. But IRCTC is popular enough for me to understand that, you know, it's not a great example of UX. And I immediately see that you've highlighted the pain points with it and you've reimagined it. Now, because I have, I'm primed to already know of that real world problem, I can just look at your solution and figure out that, oh, hey, this person has, you know, reduced 10 steps to just 2 steps. So now that's an entirely fictional project, but it's just a few wireframes, and it's not about the graphics there. Of course, sense of aesthetics is important, but it's about the line of thinking, and user experience is all about that. Now, this is an easy way to experiment yourself. You know, just pick software or platforms with, you know, terrible usability. There are many out there, most of them out there. Reimagine them in your own way and redraw them and share them with the world. It's a great learning exercise for you, real world exercise, although it's not a real world project. And it's a very valuable thing to add to your portfolio, because an external evaluator can immediately see and not even consider the fact that you don't really have real work experience just yet. Personally, this is something I again look for in the portfolios of, you know, UX UI designers. If one doesn't have a portfolio, I generally send them something like an IRCTC and I ask them, how do you think, you know, you can reimagine this? And this doesn't have to be super elaborate. Your ideas will come through in just 2 or 3 wireframes very easily. So yeah, there's that. And I'd like to add one more thing. It's very easy to, and it's also a trend to conflate design and graphics, especially graphics with UX, to make something usable and user-friendly, it has to have lots of colors. It has to have shadows and gradients, new trends like new morphism. But that is not true. Usability, UX, and graphics can be entirely separate. You can have a super simple app with just 2 colors and just a couple buttons that is way more usable and human friendly than a beautiful looking app, which turns out to be a pain to use. And if you just look at, many top apps, that's apparent. There's a trend to chase design trends, 2D illustrations. I mean, these days, no matter what website you go on, there are illustrations of, people. I don't know what it's called. Some designer popularized it. People, abstract 2D illustrations of people doing things. But you see that everywhere. That doesn't really improve usability. It helps aesthetics, but most often these attempts at using excessive graphics, it just trumps, it backfires and affects usability. So you start small you start out as simple as possible, just 2 buttons, 1 input box, whatever. And then you build up and add just enough to make it aesthetically pleasing, rather than, starting with graphics and working backwards to UI and UX. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Great. I also request other students on the call, technology students, design students, to ask questions. I'm sure with the rich experience that Kailash has, there's a lot of value that he can add to all of us here. You could unmute, speak out your name and ask the question.
Hello, sir.
Hey, Aditya.
Hi, sir. My name is Aditya Upadhyay, and I am a mechanical engineering student. So I had a doubt regarding my projects that there are some projects that I did which had the both design and as well as the engineering aspects to the final outcome. So while putting those projects in my portfolio, which aspects should I highlight more, or should it be balanced, or I'm just confused on that part.
So with your project, right, with design and engineering, you're trying to solve a problem, right? So
yes, sir.
The crux of the matter is that there's a problem and there's a solution. You could probably solve a complex problem with very little engineering, with a clever hack, or you could end up solving a simple problem with lots of engineering. So I think, again, just like one shouldn't start with graphics when it comes to UI and UX. One shouldn't start with engineering or design when you're trying to solve a problem. The crux and the focus should be the problem. Then you add, engineering, more and more engineering, more and more design, whatever is required to solve that problem. So what should come across immediately to somebody who looks at it should be how efficiently you have solved that problem. And that's what engineering is all about. I wouldn't personally see design. Again, design is subjective, right? You can design the same thing in a million different ways, million different colors. Everything may or may not look great. But what sticks out and what is unique is that how a particular problem is being solved. So you should strive to communicate that. And design and engineering are just one layer underneath those abstractions. So when I look at your project, your presentation, whatever you've built, it should be immediately apparent, not just me, anyone, that, oh, this project solves this problem. And yes, the person has used, nice usable design and clever engineering to solve that problem. So focus on the problem and the solution that you built, and design and engineering are just things underneath it. So you don't focus on design or engineering, you focus on the solution.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Hello, Kailash.
Yep.
Me here.
I am here.
Yeah, so I was just going through your GitHub profile, and it's really amazing the projects and everything that you've done, and it's really inspiring.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I noticed that you use Go a lot. So I just wanted to know what motivates you to use Go instead of other languages. So like we as students here are just exposed to JavaScript frameworks and everything.
Yeah.
So we focus on those. But since you are using Go so much, so I wanted to know your experience and why you use it and what advantages you see in using it.
Sure. About see, one thing you said that stuck out to me was, as students we are generally exposed to JavaScript. Now I'm guessing that would be because the framework that the university has prescribed involves JavaScript. But if you think about it, a university cannot potentially introduce n number of languages to students. I mean, that's just how educational frameworks work. But they introduce you to the concept of programming, web development, etc. And as I said very early on when we started this session, it's all about discovering your interest. Now, all of a sudden you spotted Go and you suddenly gotten curious about Go because you happened to see it on my GitHub page. Now, if the interest, since your interest is peaked, and I'm going to explain to you why I use Go, why we use Go at Zerodha, maybe you will take a liking to it. Now that is when you should start experimenting with Go. And of course, Node, I mean, JavaScript, whatnot, right? Whatever is required. And that is how you discover your niche. And that's how you experiment, put in a lot of effort in over time, become a specialist in Go and whatnot. It's whatever, as an engineer, whatever piques your interest, no matter how outside your curriculum it is, you should always explore enough to make sure that either you don't like it or yes, you may like it to pursue further. And that's the beauty of engineering. And that's the beauty of being in an environment like you are in. Speaking of Go, I first wrote Go in 2014 as an experiment. It's a language by Google. It was early days. I think 2014, it wasn't being used heavily in a lot of places, but it had great concurrency patterns, multi-threading, all of that. And we are a stockbroker, right? So we have a large number of concurrent users who log onto our platforms at the same time. Kite, our trading application, there are hundreds of thousands of users who are looking at it, looking at prices, stock market prices tick in real time. Now, each week transmit data through WebSocket connections. Now, if you have 1 million users online, that is 1 million connections to our server from various apps, from different apps, different instances, and the server has to hold 1 million connections. Now, there are many architectures for concurrency, and one of the things that Go did was support this thing called Go routines. It's a lightweight abstraction threading mechanism on top of multi-threading. So it's very easy to write multi-threaded concurrent programs in Go. And it's really complex in, let's say, C++ and whatnot, right? Because multi-threading is really hard. So I started out experimenting with Go in 2014 to experiment with multi-threading to support a large number of users. When I say large, it was just a couple thousand back then. And then I took a liking to Go because it's a dead simple language. Anybody can learn the basics of Go in 2 weeks. And in 2 or 3 months, you can become proficient. And one criticism that Go gets is that, it's not as advanced or sophisticated as Rust. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's JavaScript or Rust or C++ or Go. All that matters is that the problem that you're trying to solve is solved, and whatever solution that you build, the code that you write, is easily readable and maintainable by others, because tomorrow, whatever you build, others will also have to be a part of it. Now, if you write really complex code, nobody else can understand. Now, Go solves that problem because the language specs, it's really, really simple, right? It's super simple. You will see a lot of familiarity with JavaScript. It's all C style. So that's how it took a liking to it. We built our first WebSocket, market data streaming service in Go in 2014. And I figured that it's a simple language. Others in my team can very easily learn. We can sit together and start understanding each other's code in a week. So we started writing more and more Go services. And it turned out to be great. And you can write highly performant, highly highly concurrent, scalable code in Go. And the code is super simple. Anybody can read it and understand. And since then, I've just tinkered and experimented more and more. I wrote more personal projects in Go. And we've shifted pretty much everything that was written in Python at Zerodha, all the high performance applications to Go. So when you connect to Kite today, on an average day, we have 1 million people who use it concurrently. Go services, Go programs that we wrote are streaming, I think, like 35 million market ticks per second using just 2 servers and 2 running instances of the program. So that's the kind of, these are the kind of programs that you can write in Go. Of course, you can write them in C++ too, but it'll be much harder. So personally, I would prefer a super simple, dumb technology that helps me solve problems very easily, that others can also read and write, rather than a super sophisticated technology that is really hard to understand. And Go checked all of these boxes, and here we are.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Multi-threading is really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it's complex. I mean,
yeah.
It's a complex computational problem. Yeah.
Thanks, Kailash.
Sure.
Do we have any more questions, especially from UX students as well? I believe Kailash can definitely add value there as well.
Feel free to ask anything, by the way. Like I said, right, there are, as students, there are questions that we want answer to. You can't Google them and figure out. You don't really know, who to ask or, how to ask. If there are any of those questions, like I said, doesn't matter how silly they seem, please feel free to ask.
So, sir, Hatim Nomani here again.
Hey.
So talking about experience and user experience, so should we aim to have the most minimal experience involved in our application to make the best user experience? So the involvement with the user should be least. So like you mentioned about the steps with the IRCTC, there are so many steps involved in just booking a ticket. So should our aim be that the user can get to where they want to be in just as quickly as possible and as easy as possible?
Absolutely. That's basically the philosophy of UX design. And I think, see, why do we build software, right? We build software with the user interface, be it command line or a GUI, for humans to operate. And humans are not born experts to operate all sorts of UI, right? We are very used to certain physical interfaces, like a switch and a wall socket. No matter where you are in the world, you know that you can flip a switch up and down and it works. Now that's a beautiful piece of UI, right? Or a spoon, which hasn't changed in the last, God knows, I don't know, 5,000 years. Beautiful piece of, you can't perfect a spoon more. A spoon is a spoon. Great form, great function. So why is software different? It shouldn't be. I mean, why does one, UI look like X, something else looks like Y? They're completely different. There's no universal language. People customize it to no end, and a lot of different, software interfaces, they require immense cognitive burden and processing to even get through. Something that requires a user manual has already failed at UX. So the only aim is to make the UI as simple as possible. Now, when I say simple, I'm not talking about thin lines or thin fonts. I'm talking about usability, it's completely separate from design. If I go to IRCTC's website, right, you can chart out the minimum required flows. I log into my account first. Then I click on, new ticket. Then I say, pick a from and to station. Then I hit next. Next is payment. You can't really condense these steps more because, these are absolutely required. So anything that is there extra is a burden. And now I'll give you a very specific example. And these are the subtle things that make a good UI, produce good UX, right? So let's say you click on new ticket and you have to select a from station and a to station, and you have to select a from date. Now the from date field can be empty, but it's highly likely that the from field, the location is the user's current location. Now, not always, but you could probably guess that 70% of users book tickets from where they are. Now, if the UI auto detected your location and filled that by default, right? Like let's say it's Bangalore or wherever. Now that's a great piece of UX. It's so subtle. I mean, otherwise I would have had to go click. It's one extra click, but still, right? It's really subtle things like that that make good UX, not really thin buttons. And I can give you another example. If you log into your net banking, Indian net banking portals are the worst. I mean, I don't know why they do that. I mean, it's a crime against humanity, Indian net banking software. So if you go to fund transfer, and I'm talking about HDFC. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but I'm pretty sure it's the case with all other banks. They have terrible interfaces. You go to fund transfers. Let's say you just have one account, one savings account. Now there'll be a list of accounts from which you're supposed to select the account that you're supposed to transfer money from. Now, if a person only has one account, you don't even need a list. You can just pre-select that, right? But most banking interfaces don't do that. That really simple, subtle act of pre-selecting, because there's no other choice. There's only one account. Now that makes a good UX, not the color of the button, whatever. And I submit the form, something goes wrong, and it asks me to resubmit again. Now, if all the form fields are cleared because they didn't bother to have persistence, now that is very annoying. I have to fill the entire thing again. This happens on IRCTC. Now, if that form just remembered what I'd filled 2 seconds ago, so that I don't have to do the whole thing again, that's great UX. Yeah. So these are the tiny little things, tiny little human elements that reduce human annoyance when interfacing with the software UI that makes good UX. Absolutely not the colors or buttons or thick or thin fonts or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. This is Swarali, and
Hi.
it was very interesting to get your insights on all of this. So my question is kind of related to the fintech side of it. So now that we're looking at, most banks are going digital, right? Like a lot of, because we can't actually go to the bank and, do transactions like we used to. A lot of banks are taking like KYC, and all of these things are going all on video. Mm-hmm. So my question is that a lot of times when we create these kind of innovations, like in the sense of say KYC, video KYC or stuff, a lot of times these RBI regulations and things like that play a really major role. So like you said, right, it's important to make the process simpler. But like, for example, in terms of, say you're taking gold, right? So some processes, like there are so many, so do you face these challenges, since you're in that innovation circle of where you're actually designing for the financial aspect, how do you, face the challenge of when you're struck with like a RBI guideline that's coming in the way of,
Yes, absolutely. Every day we are regulated. Zerodha is regulated by SEBI, RBI, because we are a banking license, NSE, BSE, MCX, and CDSL. We are regulated by 6 different really large institutions with, and sometimes the regulations produced by these different institutions conflict. So A says you have to do this, B says you have to do this differently. So how do you even, what do you adhere to, right? So that is extremely difficult. And I think working within extreme regulatory or physical, whatever constraints, and building UX is a real challenge. And that is what produces good UX. Your problem space is so constrained, and you're forced to come out with a really simple solution within those constraints. That is where you really have to, put on your thinking hat and build good UX. We face this absolutely every day. one of the biggest risks in India in fintech is the regulatory risk. SEBI could come out with a circular literally tomorrow that changes the way brokers have worked for the last 20 years, and they'll give you 1 week to implement it. And
Right.
this scenario, what I just described, has happened like half a dozen times over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
It's been quite crazy, but that is what you have to deal with, and that is what makes you unique, and that's what gives you moat. So no matter how complex these regulations are, Zerodha has a certain way of handling these problems, right? We always, put in a lot of effort and come out with the simplest UX for users to work with these regulations. And if you look at traditional bank brokers, their focus is not on UX. They will implement the regulation, but it could be behind 100 buttons or 20 checkboxes. They don't really care about buttons of checkboxes. But we are obsessed about making it as simple as possible for the user. And when you do that, that becomes a part of your company's DNA, and people start appreciating. Your products are much more appreciated, which is what you want at the end of the day as a creator, right? You want people to appreciate your products. So absolutely. And it's very important not to be pissed off at the regulators, because that's all you'd be able to do every day. You just have to sit down and, figure out an optimal solution that works.
So I had a follow-up question, just because you said this.
Yeah.
So as a student, when I am designing something, or when I'm trying to come up with a, like you said, the steps of a flow. So I was recently looking at, how SIM cards are purchased. And I was looking at how that could become like a digital process where there are companies like Jio and Vodafone, both of them are actually coming up with a process now. But my question is that, so in that sense, how do you, stick to not, like if I'm ideating and I look up like a certain process, where do you go for looking for the right information in terms of, how do you know that your idea will be validated, like in terms of, if I say that, okay, tomorrow verification can happen through a video, how do I look it up, or where do I, as a student, where do I find that information in terms of?
It's, to be very honest, it's challenging. It's one thing to go figure out a cleaner way of doing ticket booking because it's not regulated. It's another way of trying to redesign regulatory processes, because like I said, in India, regulations work in very peculiar ways. They can change overnight, completely change overnight.
Right.
But to be very specific, SEBI and RBI publish all their regulations as circulars on their websites. This is, and just very specifically, if you search for RBI video KYC circular, these things are called circulars in the industry. You will find that one large PDF document with line by line prescription of the exact regulation on RBI's website. Same with SEBI. If you search for SEBI video KYC circular, you will find that information. And that's what gives you authoritative information on these steps. But like I said, you read this today, you build something, 2 weeks from now, SEBI may just come out and say it's all changed.
Yeah. So is it okay if the idea is a little not like, at a student level, is it okay if the idea is not going with the regulations? I know it's a very...
As a student, it's okay. In the industry, it's not okay at all. If you deviate from the regulations, you are screwed, especially when you're regulated by so many different entities. It's very risky.
Yeah.
So you can take, with student projects, you can take as much creative freedom as you want, but it's very important to know that once you enter industry, you cannot flaunt regulations.
Right.
How annoying they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Manas here again.
Hey,
first of all, thanks a lot for the feedback. I got to know a lot of things, and the points where I was lacking, and also the points where I haven't even thought should be worked on. So my question is more of a portfolio specific. So suppose we are working on some project with a team of around 10 or 20 people. So there may be UX designers, there may be some CD guys. They're working on their part. So how, as a developer, should I focus on showcasing the project where I've particularly worked on, or should it be like should it be like all of the project and all of the, I mean, yeah.
Do you mean? Do you want? Do you mean? You showcase your specialization. B, or you showcase all your projects. Is that the question?
No, sir. So my question is, should I focus on showcasing what I have contributed in that particular project, or should I focus on the?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you worked in a large team, what do you showcase out of the stuff that has come out of that team, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It should definitely be the areas that you have worked on. Let's say you worked on a big piece of software and you built this one feature. You'd rather highlight. You can say that I worked on this project, but you should highlight that one feature that you added. You should say that this was my idea. I did the engineering. I did the design. I added this. That is very valuable when you specifically show that I did this.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
We'll take this one last question. I'm sure that we'll have loads of questions, but we will also connect with, you could reach out to Kailash offline as well. So we'll take this one last question.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, Kailash. So, right? Really great session. I'll keep it short. Like coming from a design point of view, I'm an experienced designer, and this is one area where I'm really interested in, like this stock and finance area. I'm learning about it. Since when this lockdown starts or not. So from like in your company Zerodha, from a company point of view, what is the UX process you guys follow, and what's the extent of UX research you guys do as a company, or is it like majority other companies, they outsource their research work? Can you shed some light on it?
Sure. We don't outsource anything because we are a technology company. We have transformed from a financial company to a technology company, and we are a bunch of engineers and designers that sit down and work together. Now, the moment a company outsources, like that's when you get IRCTC or our net banking portals. They're all terrible. Very little outsourced work comes out well, because the people who are trying to build a product, if they are unable to impart their spirit and vision and ideas into it directly hands-on, it's very difficult for somebody else to understand that and implement it. That's not exactly how it works. So we do everything in-house. And like I said, we are an unconventional team. Of the 30 people, we have 2 are designers and everybody else is a developer. So we sit together, designers and developers, and we ideate. So we don't have managers in the team. We don't have a business requirements team that sends us requirements and we build. We build what makes sense for the product. So it doesn't start with UI or UX, it starts with the problem. So we recently introduced a feature called basket orders on Kite, where you can add a bunch of stocks and hit one button and place those orders. Now, there was a problem statement. We want users to be able to fire multiple orders in one go. Now, everything else was built on top of that. Nobody said that we'll make a basket UI, we'll make a basket icon, this will be the UX. Then we discussed a bunch of different ways of allowing users to fire multiple orders on a single click. And then we slowly worked backwards into something that is now called baskets.
Right.
So the process is like this. Kite as a platform has a UI UX language. People are familiar with interaction. So whatever new feature we add, it should conform with the existing interactions. You can't suddenly bring in a completely different control that the user has never seen. Now, if the user is, so the users, there's this thing called Market Watch, where you search for a stock and you add it to the Market Watch. So people are used to that interaction. So we're like, when you're creating a basket, we can have the same interaction. You search in that box, it gets added to the basket. And it's not a new interaction at all, because that's how Market Watch has worked for the last 6 years for us. So you don't want to invent or create anything new at all. You want to reuse as much as possible and keep it as consistent as possible with whatever the user is already familiar with. Then we came up with a prototype. We gave it to a bunch of users, private beta. That's very important. Collected their feedback. Turns out they liked it pretty much as it was. And that is usually the case when you build on top of existing UI and UX. Then we iterate, and it goes to market. That's basically it. There is no complex design process. It's literally us sitting together and looking at the stuff we have, understanding, customer requirements, solving problems, and using as much as possible. The idea is to write as little code as possible, design as little as possible, and make everything work with whatever you have. So when you do that, you usually end up with simple UI, UX, and engineering.
Right. So if I have a very less knowledge on this like stock markets and financial background. Since I coming from a commerce background, I adapt these things very naturally. Can you suggest some research papers or resources from where I can understand this ecosystem and I can create and I can create something new or a UX case study for my portfolio? Can you suggest some sources for it? Any books or anything?
If you want to understand the fundamentals of stock market, first you have to understand that to build UX. You can just check out Varsity. It's an open and free portal that we run. We simplify stock market stuff there. You could skim through it. That'll give you an idea of how stock markets fundamentally work. Once you get the fundamentals, you will discover when you log into Kite or whatnot, it'll immediately make sense to you. Yeah.
Varsity, am I right?
Yeah, Zerodha Varsity. You can just Google that.
Okay. And apart from this fundamentals, any detailed resources, anything else? Like
there is Investopedia that gives you a global perspective on markets, but it may be way too exhaustive. But yeah, you can make a note. Investopedia is a good resource to understand finance and markets.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
That's it from my side.
Yeah, thank you.
Rishabh, over to you. Please come in.
Yes. Okay, so I would like to close the session by saying it was a really insightful and informative session. I would like to thank Kailash sir for sharing his thoughts with us. And we hope that our students will incorporate all your feedback that you gave regarding their portfolios and build great portfolios. So as was said, if students have any other remaining questions, they could take it up with you offline.
Yeah, please feel free to email me if you guys have any questions. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Kailash, for joining us. I think the amount of time, energy that you've invested in giving the feedback, the depth in which you've gone, the meticulous way shows your commitment to ensuring that the students definitely get certain learning out of it. Not all, individuals are committed to this. So thank you so much for inspiring us.
Thank you.
Since you've also added a lot of value, we wish you Happy Teachers Day on behalf of all of us.
Wow.
Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for inspiring us. We look forward to staying connected with you. And if there are any questions from our students, we'll take it offline. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye.